Sheikh, I mean, I want to talk about a little bit of, about Medina being an Islamic state. I believe you are of the opinion that Medina was not a full-fledged, quote-unquote, Islamic state at the time of Hijrah from Mecca to Medina, but it realized its statehood after the conquest of Mecca. I mean, this is quite interesting, as I've not really come across this argument before. I mean, why do you believe that was the case, and how does it play a pivotal role in determining the methodology for the revival, or for the revival movements, which are in 21st century?
Yeah, so we agreed that, we have to look at the seerah of the Prophet to derive a process of how to bring social change and social transformation. And so, to me, not a state, because the victory is in the Quran defined as taking over, you can say, the capital, or al-Qura, the mother of all the cities, which is Mecca. And so that started with Hudaybiyah and ended with Fathul Makkah. The time before that is Hijrah. Hijrah, you don't do Hijrah to an Islamic state. To Islamic state, you have to go to an Islamic state if there's an Islamic state. You make Hijrah away from oppression to a place where you can make a base. Now, let me mention a verse of the Quran regarding this, because the Quran is very clear in terms of a process. There's Nusrah. So you can say Medina was a place of Nusrah of Allah, the help of Allah. And then the Fath was the victory where the Prophet became the crownless king, and its peak was Fathul Makkah. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Man la yastawi minkum man anfaqa min qabl al-fath wa qatal." So this is the dividing line according to Al-Hadith. Not equal are those who fought and spent their time and their money for the cause of Allah before the victory, which is Fathul Makkah, and those after. Okay, when Allah says in Surah An-Nur, وَعْدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. I will give them khilafan. So the Nur is revealed in Medina, in the middle end of Medina, rather. Okay, and so this is coming. We will give you khilafah, and authority in the land has not been yet given to you. And if you read Imam Ibn Kathir's explanation of this, he quotes a hadith of Rabi radiallahu anhu, who said, basically, in Medina, we were always in a state of fear. This is why that particular ayah talks about fear, is we were, fighting there. Okay, number one. Number two, listen to what I'm about to say, is very, very important. The Prophet ﷺ was not able to apply punishments upon people in Medina. Let me give you an example. When Uhud happened, the Battle of Uhud, 1,100 people left, 300 people came back. 300 people came back with Abdullah bin Ubay. Okay, the Prophet didn't ask anyone, why did you go back? After Fathul Makkah, when Tabuk was commanded, every single human being has to go to Tabuk, Ka'ab and the three others, the story of the three. The Prophet made a line, tell me, why didn't you go? Why didn't you? After when? After Fathul Makkah. After Fathul Makkah, everyone was asked, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go? Why didn't you go? Because now there is a state. Now you have the power to legislate properly. And so the time before Medina, and why does this matter in terms of the revolutionary process to bring Khilafah is that it is not logical to me, and I don't think the Quran goes in this direction either, that you're simply preaching and then you have a state, versus you are preaching and you're then the state of Nusra. You have preaching, ideological challenge, but then you organizing the people. You're bringing the Jama'at together. You have the Amir. You organize them together, and then you use that Jama'at to challenge the system. So this is the phase of Nusra. When you challenge the phase, the people, okay, then there has to be a clash. And because there has to be a clash, that means that then you can then have the fath if Allah desires after that. So the way is not as in there's street preaching, and then somebody up there will, maybe listen to what you're saying. And over here also I want to mention a rule. Now the seerah has 100 things. I can make any interpretation of the seerah. I can say the purpose of the Makki seerah, the Makki phase was to go to Miraj, for example. That was the purpose, to reach to Allah. It can be you can make many interpretations. the way you should have a methodology in how you do that, and I would say those aspects of the seerah that are in Quran are primary. And those, because then there's congruency in your methodology between the seerah of the Prophet and Quran. And so you give priority to those aspects that are in the Quran, and then you give priority to those aspects that are not in the Quran. You make this distinction, okay? Now over here, I want to mention something very important. The Mithaq al-Madina, what we usually is sometimes talked about, the Constitution of Medina, or what was that? هذا كتاب من محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is a document from Muhammad, right? بين المسلمين والمؤمنين من قريش واليثرب ومن لحق بهم وجحد بهم أمة واحدة من دون الناس. That the Muslims from Quraysh and Yathrib and those that join them, they are one people away from everyone else. Number one. Number two, you do not have a treaty, a state does not have a treaty with the subgroup, a treaty with the Jews, and this is the treaty with the pagans, and then now we have a common, this is like a confederation of a sort, you can say, a treaty of a common, you can say, on a common ground. And this is why when the issue of Ifk took place, when Aisha was blamed for, you know, when the slandering happened, what did the Prophet, he went to the masjid, he said, is there, I don't know anything of good except I don't know anything but good about my family. And he said, is there anyone amongst you that is willing to help me? The Prophet said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Prophet didn't question the people that were Abdul-Adhim. When was the Quran giving the instruction to now fight against the munafiqeen? After the Fath al-Makkah, when Surah Tawbah was revealed, and Allah says, now you be harsh on the munafiqeen, and the Masjid al-Dirar was dropped down. So I'm saying it doesn't move from street preaching to a state. According to my understanding of the Quran, there's Nusra and then Fath. فَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. Give us Nusra over the disbelievers. And that includes فَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفر عنا عنهم سيئاتهم. So there is this process of nusrah to the deen, and there is this process when nusrah reaches its actual objective, which in the case of the Prophet was reaching Mecca, or which is the main city of Arabia. Okay, when the Prophet reaches Mecca, that now shows he's the crownless king of Arabia. He was a leader in Medina. But even as a leader, just like Israel for a long time, they weren't even willing to sit down and negotiate with Israel for a long time. Okay, just like that, they wanted to eliminate, they wanted to challenge, and they wanted to get rid of the Prophet. They weren't willing to even acknowledge his authority. But when Hudaybiyah happened, it was a victory. Why? Because now for the first time, the Arabs of that time, the Quraysh, have now acknowledged that he's a leader of a people. They had to sit down and acknowledge that. Whether they agree with him or they had to acknowledge he's a leader. And so, yes.
Sorry, go on. I'll let Brother Mazin respond.
Sure.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought you were going to let him continue. Jazakallah khair. So I made a few points because there's a number of points to go through. So I would say that I think maybe a good point to begin with on this topic is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he sent the expedition of trying to remember the name of the Sahabi. I'll mention it once I remember it. He sent them, and in the hadith he said to go and to find new lands where there are Muslims or non-Muslims. He said, wait until Fajr if you hear the adhan and so on, and then go call them. He said, id'uhum ila al-Islam.
This happened after Makkah, just so you know, this event.
What's that?
This event happened after Fath al-Makkah. But anyway, continue.
Yes. And that's actually irrelevant to the hadith, actually, to the point that I'm making. So, but jazakallah khair. So the Prophet said, id'uhum ila al-Islam. فإن أجابوك فاقبل منهم وكف عنهم ثم أدعوهم إلى التحول من دارهم إلى دار المسلمين or دار المهاجرين, the two narrations. واخبرهم أنهم إن فعلوا ذلك فلهم ما للمهاجرين وعليهم ما على المهاجرين. And then the hadith continues. So in translation, the meaning of the hadith is, the Prophet ﷺ said, go and call them to Islam. So if you find a land that are non-Muslims, call them to Islam. If they accept Islam from you, meaning they all became Muslim, like that's it, they're becoming Muslim, and then don't fight them. Accept their Islam and don't fight them. Then call them to change from their dar to the dar of the Muslimin. Meaning that it doesn't matter if they're all Muslims. It doesn't matter if it's Muslim majority or 100% Muslim. That means nothing. The thing that defines the dar is the laws that are applied on the land and the authority of who has authority over that land, who has legislative authority and military authority over that land. They have to have tahawul, which means to transfer. Not even hijrah. He doesn't say al-hijrah min darihim, meaning like leave your land. It means to tahawul, means to transfer the status of your land from whatever it is to the same status of the land of the Muslimin, the Muhajirin. You have to come under the authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And let them know that if they do this, then you will have the same rights and the same responsibilities as the people of Dar al-Islam, basically. And he told them, and the hadith continues, he said, and if they don't, then they will be treated like the foreigners, like Arab. They will have the same responsibilities as Muslims do, and the same ahkam shari'i will apply to them, will apply on them, but they will not have anything from the fate, from the money of what was taken from war, and so on and so forth. And so that's the first thing. So when we define Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr, it's defined by that, not by the people are Muslims. It's defined by the authority of the land. We also so there's two things that we know in terms of what defines the land. One is that it is ruled by only what Allah has revealed. So the legislative authority is Allah Azza wa Jal, and the military authority is Muslims. So if it rules the other one Allah has revealed, it's not Dar al-Islam. And if the kuffar are in control of the military, they control the security of the land, then it's also not Dar al-Islam. So when the Prophet ﷺ moved from Mecca to Medina, did he have those two qualities?
No.
So he did not have the ability to implement all of Islam. So he was implementing some of other than Islam, according to what you're saying?
Okay. What the thing is, I just gave you the example. The Prophet asked for help. Who's going to help me in the case of Aisha? When the munafiqeen left the battlefield, don't you think a state should ask people why they left? 300 people left the battlefield?
Sure, and I think maybe the better question is not what do I think, is what is the hukm shari'i on that
militarily,
issue?
He made a contract with the others that we would fight together as a confederation.
Of course.
It wasn't his own authority. He was joining his authority with the authorities of others.
Yes. And so the hukm, first of all, is were they citizens of the state, or were they
There's no modern concept of state at that time.
But that doesn't matter, and that's why actually at the very beginning of this discussion, I mentioned that even this, when it comes to istilahi meanings or even shar'i meanings, we always understand the reality first, and then we apply the words to those realities. You don't want to start with a word and then try to find the reality that matches it.
I'm saying the reality is the Prophet was there, one of many parties in Medina. He didn't control.
Okay, so who else had legislative control over Medina?
It was a communal thing. Do you know how?
So name one other. If it was communal, name one other party that actually had legislative authority over or equal to the authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
The same way tribes do it.
So give me an example, though. There's no need to speak in generals, just like this and just like that. I'm asking for a specific individual or instance where the Prophet ﷺ was equal to or less than another legislative authority in Medina.
The Prophet ﷺ did not tell the Jews what to do or how to legislate themselves.
Actually, he absolutely did. Except for in matters of marriage and certain foods and so on, he allowed them, and he actually said they will be allowed to rule themselves with marriage and so on and so forth. But when it came to everything else,
according to the treaty that the Prophet made with them,
sure, but still,
another party in a confederation of parties. The first line of Misaq al-Medina is, "We are one group, ummatun wahidatun min duni nas." We are one party away from the rest of the party of this Misaq al-Medina. That's the first line.
Yes. Now, away from is maybe not the exact most accurate translation. To the exclusion of.
To the exclusion.
Meaning, and it means that the Muslims.
Exclusion of the others.
Yes.
That are coming into this contract.
Yes.
Okay.
So either the Prophet ﷺ had his own independent.
Where is it written the Prophet had authority over Medina?
Before we get to that, either the Prophet ﷺ was an independent legislative and military authority, and he had some agreements with other independent authorities, or he had no actual authority, or those authority. So are you saying he wasn't independent and he had no authority, and he just like so and that's what I'm trying to understand. So okay, let's look at the three examples.
Authority as a prophet over the people that believed in him.
So he had authority over the Muslims, but he didn't have authority over the Jews?
He didn't.
Okay, so let's say we go with that. Okay, so before we get into the details of what he did with the Jews, let's talk about him just with the Muslims. So Al-Aws al-Khazraj and the Muslims in Medina. So
actually, let's take this one step back. In Baytul Aqaba, the bay'ah that he took from the people in Medina before coming to Medina was for what, under what condition? Protect me. Yes?
Yeah.
The bay'ah was, you will protect me. I'm coming to Medina, not because I will legislate, not because I will have authority, but because you will protect me. Okay? When did that change? That changed in the Battle of Badr, where they said, no, Prophet, don't worry about what we gave bay'ah to you before. Whatever you say to us, we will do. We will not be like Bani Israel. Okay? If you tell us to take our camels to the ends of the ocean, we will take them to the ends of the ocean. Okay?
So are you saying that the Prophet ﷺ did not enter in Medina?
Was with his jama'ah.
So you're saying the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Aws al-Khazraj,
if he asked the Jews to leave, or he took some steps against the Jews because they broke the treaty of Misaq al-Medina, whatever steps he did as a jama'ah. Okay? It was not as I am ruling Medina. And the Quran is clear about this, because the Quran also tells the Prophet, if they come to you, you may judge them. And if they come to you, you may choose not to judge them.
But one second, that's related to that's related to muqadat. Okay, but I think we need to be careful not to be mixing up so many issues. There's a couple of issues that need to be clear here. So you think that the Prophet ﷺ entered into Medina and Al-Aws al-Khazraj agreed to protect him, but they did not see him as their ruler?
They agreed to protect him, and therefore he was reluctant, even in the Battle of Badr, about what they want to do. They did not take him as a like a king, ruler, and legislator. No, he was a legislator only over the Muslims, because they took him as a prophet.
So we're talking about Al-Aws al-Khazraj, though. So we're not talking about the Jews. We're not, because again, I'm going with what you're saying, that let's put the Jews aside for a second, and we're just talking about the Muslims.
Khazraj who didn't believe in the prophet, just because.
What's that?
There were parts of Aws and Khazraj who didn't believe in the prophet yet. There were people in Aws and Khazraj in the beginning who didn't yet believe in him.
Sure. But we're talking about Al-Aws al-Khazraj as a unit. When they came out with the Prophet ﷺ and welcomed him into the city, and they came in their full military gear, and they had the discussion with them and Abu Talib and them with Rasulullah ﷺ, and they said, or sorry, not Abu Talib, they had the conversation about this is the second one, and they talked about that enter the city, heard and obeyed. Musma'an wa muta'.
That's for the Muslims.
Okay, so he entered, heard and obeyed.
For the Muslims, as one jama'ah.
But for you to, but again, we're not going to talk about the Jews just yet. We're not going to talk about the other tribes just yet, and how the ahkam sharia unfolded with regards to them. Because remember, the Quran had not been fully revealed by then. So the Prophet ﷺ did not enter into Medina with all the ahkam sharia for society. Hudud and ta'zir and qisas and everything like that.
If you don't look at it in terms of, again, the legalities of what's coming down, in terms of Quranic language, there's nusra and then there's fath. Okay? The Prophet said, La hijra ba'd al-fathi. There's no hijrah after the conquest of Mecca.
Okay.
Why? Because it's all Islam. There's no hijrah. This whole land is Islam now.
So but hold on. That hadith, the mufassirin and ulama spoke about this, and they specifically stated, and that's interesting because I just read about this. I read extra additional details yesterday because I gave a talk about it, which was that the ulama said that the Prophet ﷺ was speaking to the people of Mecca specifically, and he was saying to them, prior to the Fatah of Mecca, if you did hijrah to Medina, you were considered among the muhajirin. But now that Mecca has been opened, there's no hijrah after the Fatah. Exactly. It means that you can't be muhajirin anymore.
Medina and being in Mecca, there's a big difference. And the difference is in this إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. the goal of the Prophet was to open Mecca from the beginning. It was always to open up Mecca. It was always to bring down the idols and restore the house of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. That was always his goal.
And I don't disagree with that, that it was always his aim to bring Mecca under Islam, but that doesn't change the fact that he had a state prior to that, and there's nothing logically or textually that would indicate that he could not have a state until he had Mecca. You can have a state that is not Mecca, and then
an example of the difference of how he behaved with the military.
Yeah.
While being in Medina and then after Fatul Makkah. There's a clear difference.
Well, what was the difference?
If somebody left the battlefield in the the phase of being in Medina, he was not asked, why did you leave the battlefield? Or why didn't you participate?
But the
after
ahkam,
everyone is asked, why didn't you participate? That is legislative power.
Yes, so the difference is, no, that's not legislative power. So you're confusing legislative power, because what you're implying there is the Prophet ﷺ did not have the ability to implement Islam on the land over which he controlled. He controlled Medina. For you to say that the Prophet ﷺ had no choice but to implement other than what Allah has revealed, as far as, for example, if you're to even say Muslims ran away from the battlefield. If you're to even, sorry, one second, let me finish my sentences. Please allow me to finish my sentences. I ask you to please be patient. Let me finish my thought. So what I'm saying is that what the Prophet ﷺ, now when we talk about a Muslim going to a battlefield and running away from the battlefield, the punishment for them, if they were to be punished, falls under ta'zir. It's neither hudud, obviously it's not qisas. It doesn't fall under hudud. Hudud is the right of Allah Azza wa Jal. It has to be applied. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, if Fatima, daughter of Muhammad, were to steal, I would cut her hand. So the hudud, you have to do it no matter what. Ta'zir is up to the ruler. Ta'zir means the Khalifa has the right to decide how he wants to punish. He can punish or he can completely let it go. So when the Prophet ﷺ allowed those who ran away to not be punished, that is up to him. And to say that he was unable to implement it is a very, very big jump that you would have to justify without just simply saying because I feel so or I think so or it matches my analysis. The thing is that every single thing, and that's why I'm speaking from a juristic perspective, and you seem to be speaking a little bit in generalities and assumptions. You're saying, well, Allah wants, and the Prophet ﷺ felt, and this was because, and there's lots of assumptions and generalities. And the problem with this type of discussion, you could be right, but you also could be wrong. And if we all speak in generalities, there's absolutely no way anyone could ever know that they're right. Because I think the Prophet ﷺ, he intended this, or he wanted this, or I'm going to make all sorts of assumptions about what it is that the Prophet ﷺ or Allah Azza wa Jal wanted. And this is taqawwul ala Allah, right? And this is not allowed, actually. We're not allowed to make assumptions unless we have evidence. When I'm referring to ahkam shar'iyya, which you seem to be referring to as if it's not a good thing, what I'm saying is that the only thing that we can start from is hukm shari. Once we determine the hukm shari, then we can look at the more vague things. For example, what the Prophet ﷺ intended and what Allah Azza wa Jal might have meant, and so on. The same thing goes for riba. First, we forget, is it haram, is it halal for this contract? Is this contract riba? If it is haram, then you can look at, okay, well, what are the benefits and what could be the hikmah, what could be the illah? Of course, the illah has to go back to textual evidence. But either way, so when we're talking about why the Prophet ﷺ let them go or not let them go, you can't start from making assumptions. You have to start from knowing the hukm related to those who run away. You have to start from the hukm of knowing the relationship of Rasulullah ﷺ with the Jews. You have to know for the hukm of Rasulullah of every single situation you want to bring up, every single example you bring up, you are required to know the hukm for that specific instance first, and then you can talk about whatever assumptions you want to make about, well, why is that hukm that way? So if the hukm is ta'zir, you can't say he didn't implement the hukm on them because he couldn't or because he had no authority and so on. No, he absolutely had the authority and absolutely could have punished them, but chose not to because either it would have caused a struggle that was too big for him at the time.
Now remember, this is your assumptions.
Hold on. Only that last part. It could be. But when it comes to the hukm of ta'zir, the hukm of ta'zir is up to the Khalifa. That's not an assumption, is it?
The hukm of ta'zir is there. That's fine. Whether it's ta'zir or hudud, he did not apply it in Medina. He applied it after Fatul Makkah.
But regardless, I'm still saying it doesn't change the fact that it is ta'zir. If people run away from the battlefield, it's not hudud. And since it is ta'zir, the Khalifa has the right to choose to apply it or not to apply it. I'm not making assumptions there. Now, why the Prophet ﷺ chose to not punish them,
And
I'm
the
not
reason
going to make assumptions about that. I'm just
because
simply going to say that
after
he had the right to not.
He is the crownless king of Arabia. He has the power to question now. Before that, he didn't question, and he never.
No, he had the power to question them, but he chose to let it go.
Any steps against the munafiqeen in Medina.
When the Prophet ﷺ wanted to execute one of the munafiqeen, I think it was actually Abdullah bin Ubay, and he said, "I will not kill him because I don't want the people of Arabia to say that I kill my companions." When was this? Before or after the Fatih of Mecca?
I'm not talking about killing, but any.
Hold on. Just answer the question, please. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to know your answer. Was this before or after?
I'm saying.
But hold on, was this before or after the Fatih?
All steps against munafiqeen were taken place after Fatih Mecca.
No. This particular hadith, this particular narration where he said, "I don't want people to say that I kill my companions." Was this before or after? This was before. This took place before the Fatih of Mecca. And so the question is that why...
After the Treaty of Hudaybiyah,
this hadith took place before. I know this, I'm sure of this. This is before the Fatih of Mecca.
I mean, after Hudaybiyah, sorry.
Yes, this took place, yes.
Which is also why the Prophet sent the letters to the kings after Hudaybiyah. Because now because he's a recognized leader.
Hudaybiyah was not Fatih of Mecca. What are you talking about?
Hudaybiyah was the recognition that he is now a leader.
That was just the recognition of Quraysh as a leader. And yes, there was a lot that was written about how important that was as a transitional point, but that doesn't mean that he only becomes a leader when Quraysh recognizes him.
You're missing the point. Number one...
but Sheikh, the letters that were sent to different kings after the Sulh Hudaybiyah, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, that was actually way before the conquest of Makkah, wasn't it? So basically, it
was 2 years before.
So if we were to assume that the state came into existence,
the Prophet did not write letters to anyone in Mecca. He did not write anyone in the beginning of Medina. Not in the end. Not towards the middle of Medina. After Fatul Mecca.
No, but the letter to the Hercules was actually right before the conquest of Mecca, wasn't it?
That means after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That's what I'm saying.
No, but if we're saying that the state came into existence as a full
I am saying
state
the terminology of the Quran are very important. The Quran makes a distinction between nusra and fatr. وَأُخْرَى تُحِبُّونَهَا نَصْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. In the Quranic terminology, the process is nusra and then fatr.
Okay? So what I'm saying is that right. I would just like one clarification.
The reason I'm talking fast is because I have to actually...
Yeah, you have to go. Yeah, we're going to just close it in about 5 minutes. Just the last question. So if you're saying that the state came into existence post conquest of Makkah, then why would the Prophet write to the Roman Empire prior to that?
I just said the Fath began with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. I said this. إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. This phase between the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, where he was now recognized as a leader in Arabia, okay? He exercised this power now that he had to write these letters. It was in this time period where he now accelerated his da'wah efforts in this peace treaty situation. Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna jump in. Sorry, just to be fair to Sheikh Omar Baloch, he has a class starting in a couple of minutes. So just to be fair, I think we might have to continue this in another part because and is that okay with you brothers that we continue this in a part 2? Is that okay, Sheikh Omar Baloch?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So with that, I think just to be fair for regarding the timing left, I think we can probably end it right now. What do you think, Ali?
Yeah, I think just like a minute for each Brother Mazin and Sheikh Omar, just closing remarks, and then we can actually conclude.
Who first?
Mazin, go ahead.
And so the one thing I will say is that the Sulh of Hudaybiyah took place year 6 after the Hijrah. And Fatih Mecca took place
year 8.
Year 8? Yeah. I was thinking year 9. Yeah. So the to say, so that I guess maybe that for the next time we have to sit down and start maybe at that point, which is, did the state begin in Mecca, or did the state begin after Sulh Hudaybiyah, or when? The Prophet ﷺ is now sending letters immediately after the Sulh Hudaybiyah to all of the different empires of the world, saying Aslam Taslam, and fall under my authority.
That's
right? So this type of statement is the statements of a leader of a state. So and as far as what the Prophet ﷺ did during the period, inshallah we'll go through. I'll actually prepare much more detail about what took place during the period in Medina from the Hijrah until Sulh Hudaybiyah. But the Prophet ﷺ managed the society as a ruler. He organized the economy. He organized the military. He had battles. He did everything as a ruler would. He did not do it as a fringe group, as a gang. He did it as a state leader. He had mu'awinin. He said, وَزِرَاءِ فِي السَّمَاءِ مِكَالُ وَجِبْرِيلُ وَوَزِرَاءِ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَبُو بَكْرَ وَعُمَرُ. My two assistants are in the sky, are Jibreel and Mikal. My two assistants on earth, Abu Bakr and Umar. He sent Ali radiallahu anhu in different and many of the Sahaba in different directions to go and either form treaties with different tribes. This was all before Sulh Hudaybiyah and so on. So all these things are indications of somebody who was acting as a state leader. Now, when we talk about a state, we're so used to talking about great, huge states such as nation states, but back then, small tribes were equivalent to states because the same reality was in legislative independence and military independence. And he had that the moment that he walked into Medina. But inshallah, I guess we can talk about the details.
Yeah, Sheikh Omar, closing remarks, and then we can conclude.
Bismillah, I tend to look at things from the Quran, right? And so the Quran makes a distinction of two phases of his prophetic mission. One is Nusrah and one is Fatr. And in this, and this is another important point that I wanted to bring up, because the revelations of the Quran were coming in accordance to what was appropriate. It wasn't like the Sahaba could have gotten a certain revelation and like it wasn't haphazard. It was to be completed in accordance to the mission with hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran mentions this, right? So now what do we understand from Nusrah and Fatr? The early phase is the phase of da'wah, but when people start gathering around the Prophet, as the Quran says, Man ansari ilallah, who's my helper in the cause of Allah? People gather and they respond, Nahnu ansarullah, we're the helpers of Allah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu ansarullah, become the helpers of Allah. And here the example of Isa alayhi salam is given. So Nusra is, you're joining a jama'ah, you have an amir, you start working. Now there are different tasks. You can start applying Islam to your jama'ah. You can start applying Islam in your sphere of power. Fine, no problem. But from the Quranic terminology, your mission, your purpose is not completed until a state comes into existence, as in where now this is an area where Islam will apply its laws. And the Quran and the Prophet made this is why he said after Fath al-Makkah, he said, okay, now there will be no other religion here other than Islam. And the most difficult legislations came in this time period, because this was the time period where the Prophet, meaning it's not just by chance. There was a reason that the laws of economy like riba and stuff were revealed last. There was a reason for that, because he couldn't legislate in the beginning of Medina the way he could at the end of Medina. Okay, and so there is the Nusrah, وَأُخْرَى تُحِبُّونَهَا نَصْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَتْحٌ قَرِيبٌ, and a near victory. Fathun Qareeb means a near victory, because when Surah Saf is revealed in this surah, Surah Saf is revealed, the Fathul Makkah had not yet happened. Okay, and so Fathun Qareeb. This Fath here is that from where does he now begin to become in the real sense of the word, an authority figure? Okay, you can look at this from international politics perspective, or you can look at this from the Quranic perspective. From an international politics perspective, I'll give you the example of Israel. Israel can keep shouting, I am Israel, I'm Israel. It doesn't matter till it forces the Arab states around it to come and sit down and negotiate with me. Then it becomes a power. When the Prophet ﷺ forces his opponents to sit down with him and negotiate with him, now he is a real leader in the real sense of the word. Just saying to your own group of believers, I'm a leader, doesn't make you a leader until you force your opponents to say, yes, you're a leader. This happened in Fath al-Makkah, in Hudaybiyah. Now, starting from Hudaybiyah to Fath al-Makkah is the last phase of this phase of Fath. And the final victory when he entered into Makkah, removing the idols as a crownless king. Before that, he was a Jama'ah. He had authority over his people. He was negotiating with everyone else, right? But he didn't have that legislative power that he had after the Fath al-Makkah. And the example is, look at his actions the Prophet took, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after Fath al-Makkah. There's a reason, and you have to explain, why does the Quran make these terminologies, Nusrah and Fath? And what is the purpose of saying Fath if it is non-consequential? If it was because Quran is guidance for all times. And so how does this Nusrah and Fath translate into something practical for us today? I really do have to now go.
Okay, so Jazakallah khair for that. We will continue this. This is not the end of this discussion on this specific topic. So in the next part, we will continue with continuing this discussion, but there are more important, in my view, more important items to discuss concerning the revival of the Ummah in today's time. Topics related to that question will be thoroughly discussed as well. So Jazakallah khair for both of you brothers. And we look forward, inshallah, in a week or two to continue part 2. Thank you everyone for listening. Assalamu alaikum.